WrestleMania 6 was supposed to be the beginning of a new era. In the spring of 1990, the lights inside the Sky Dome glowed brighter than ever, and more than 60,000 fans screamed as two titans walked toward destiny. On one side was Hulk Hogan, the face of 1980s wrestling, the golden-haired superhero who carried the WWF on his back for nearly a decade. On the other was the Ultimate Warrior, the explosive, unpredictable, neon-painted force of nature who looked like he had been engineered in some chaotic cosmic laboratory. Vince McMahon believed that this was the moment the torch would finally pass, but the story that followed became one of wrestling's greatest what-ifs. Warrior was not just another wrestler, he was a phenomenon. His entrances were pure electricity, sprinting to the ring, shaking the ropes like a man possessed, hair flying, face paint glowing under the arena lights. Children worshipped him. Teenagers idolized him. Even adults were mesmerized. His aura wasn't just created, it was felt. And for Vince McMahon, who always searched for the next larger-than-life icon, Warrior felt like the perfect successor to Hulk Hogan. By early 1990, Hogan's popularity, though still enormous, wasn't as unstoppable as it once had been. His movies were failing, the WWF's business was slowing down, and a new generation of fans wanted something fresher, faster, and wilder. Warrior had all the ingredients: charisma, intensity, and a physique that looked like it belonged on a comic book cover. Vince saw him as the future. The man who could launch the WWF into the 1990s with a new identity. And so WrestleMania 6 was booked as the match of the decade. Champion versus champion. Immovable force versus explosive energy. A dream match that felt like destiny. Warrior defeated Hogan clean in the center of the ring, lifting both the WWF Championship and the Intercontinental Championship as fireworks exploded above him. At that moment, it felt like wrestling had entered a new age. Kids cried tears of joy. Commentators declared Warrior the new immortal. McMahon smiled with the confidence of a man who believed he had found the next global megastar. But behind the scenes, the truth was much more complicated. Warrior was never as stable as he looked under the paint. His intense energy was exhausting, not energizing, and his creative ideas were unpredictable. Some found them inspirational, others found them bizarre. And as champion, those cracks in his foundation quickly started to show. The first major problem appeared just weeks after WrestleMania. Ticket sales didn't rise, house shows didn't sell out, merchandising didn't explode. Warrior might have been popular, but he wasn't Hogan popular. Hogan appealed to everyone: men, women, families, casual fans. Warrior appealed mostly to kids. His promos, filled with cosmic metaphors and frantic shouting, confused many viewers. Some fans loved it. Many didn't understand it. And without Hogan's broad appeal, the WWF's revenue began to slip. Another issue was Warrior's in-ring style. His matches were short, chaotic, and mostly built around explosive bursts of movement. But as champion, he couldn't rely on 2-minute squash matches. He needed to wrestle long, story-driven main events against experienced opponents. This exposed the fact that Warrior wasn't technically polished. He lacked psychology, pacing, and storytelling inside the ring. Hogan, for all his simplicity, understood crowd control on a master level. Warrior did not. Then came the backstage problems. Warrior wasn't easy to work with. He showed up late, left early, and clashed with management. His sense of self-importance inflated immediately after winning the championship. Some wrestlers felt he didn't respect them. Others believed he didn't want to learn. And Vince McMahon began realizing that the man he hoped would lead the company was already becoming a headache. The business numbers reflected the turmoil. The summer of 1990 saw house show attendance fall dramatically. Merch sales dipped. Television ratings softened. The WWF was entering a difficult period economically, and Warrior was struggling to carry the weight of being the company's top star. Meanwhile, Hulk Hogan was still selling tickets everywhere he went, even without the title. Fans who grew up with him were not ready to move on, and Warrior was unable to fill the emotional void left by Hogan's absence from the main spotlight. By the time autumn arrived, Vince McMahon faced a difficult reality. Warrior as champion was not working. He was too unpredictable, too one-dimensional, and too unstable to be the long-term face of the WWF. The company needed a shift, and Vince was forced to reconsider everything he hoped Warrior would become. But instead of tightening up, Warrior grew more frustrated. He believed the company wasn't supporting him enough. He felt he wasn't being pushed as strongly as Hogan had been, and deep inside, he feared the fans weren't embracing him the way they embraced his predecessor. That insecurity fed into ego, and ego fed into conflict. What began as McMahon's greatest gamble was turning into one of his biggest problems. Warrior's first major test as champion came at SummerSlam 1990 against Rick Rude, a capable opponent, but not the kind of a monster heel that typically elevated a babyface champion. The match was solid, but not spectacular. Fans were excited, but not electrified. And the main event didn't deliver the magic McMahon wanted. It became clear that Warrior was not drawing at the level expected from a world champion. By the end of 1990, the WWF quietly began preparing for a transition. Warrior's title reign had lasted nearly 8 months, but it had not produced the business results the company desperately needed. Vince had taken a massive risk, and the outcome was financially disappointing. What began as the ultimate challenge at WrestleMania 6 was slowly transforming into the ultimate letdown. Fans didn't know yet, but the writing was already on the wall. Warrior's time as champion was coming to an end. The question was not if, but when. And the moment came in early 1991, with a shocking opponent that would expose Warrior's biggest weakness and permanently change his career forever. The warning signs were already flashing, but the real collapse began in early 1991. Vince McMahon needed a dramatic storyline that would re-energize the company and bring fans back to the arenas. Warrior, as champion, wasn't delivering the numbers the WWF needed. So Vince made a bold decision. Put the Ultimate Warrior into a feud with Sergeant Slaughter, a storyline wrapped in heavy political controversy during the Gulf War. It was risky, emotional, and perfectly timed for Hogan to reclaim his spot. And Warrior walked straight into the trap without realizing it. The storyline was intense. Sergeant Slaughter had turned into an Iraqi sympathizer, a character that enraged American audiences. Fans booed him not just as a villain, but as a traitor. Vince wanted a villain so hated that Warrior's triumph would feel massive. But instead, the storyline became too big and swallowed Warrior whole. Slaughter's heat was nuclear, but not in a way that made Warrior look stronger. It made him look like a side character in a storyline designed for someone else. Behind the scenes, Hogan was being quietly positioned for a return to the top. The Gulf War storyline was tailor-made for Hogan's patriotic character. He was the American superhero. Warrior was the cosmic wild man. In this political atmosphere, there was no contest. Hogan was the man fans emotionally connected with. And Vince McMahon, always sensitive to fan reactions, moved his pieces accordingly. The match at the Royal Rumble 1991 was the breaking point. Warrior defended the WWF Championship against Sergeant Slaughter. A match that should have been a dominant victory to solidify him as champion. Instead, Hogan interfered. He ran to ringside and helped Warrior fight off Slaughter's manager, General Adnan. But in the chaos, Warrior lost focus, Slaughter capitalized, and pinned him. Just like that, the Ultimate Warrior lost the WWF Championship. No build-up, no epic story, no dramatic payoff. It was over. The man who defeated Hulk Hogan clean at WrestleMania lost his title in a chaotic mess designed to push the company back toward Hogan. Warrior wasn't just dethroned, he was replaced. The confidence Vince once had in him was gone. the locker room reaction was mixed. Some wrestlers believe Warrior deserved the fall, saying he never respected the business enough to improve his craft. Others said Vince betrayed him by giving up too fast. But one thing was clear. Warrior felt humiliated. He went from being the chosen one to being treated like an afterthought in less than a year. But things were about to get even worse. In the months that followed, Warrior grew increasingly erratic. He told Vince McMahon that he deserved better pay, equal to Hogan, even though Hogan still sold far more tickets. Warrior demanded more control over his storylines, more merchandise royalties, and more respect backstage. Some of his demands were legitimate. Many were fueled by insecurity. And Vince, already losing millions during a business downturn, wasn't willing to gamble again. Then came the infamous Ultimate Warrior letter. A long, emotional, borderline threatening note he sent to Vince McMahon just before SummerSlam 1991. In the letter, Warrior demanded higher pay, private travel accommodations, and equal treatment to Hogan. He suggested that if he didn't get it, he would not perform. The timing was intentional, one day before the pay-per-view. A move designed to force Vince into a corner. Warrior believed Vince would have no choice but to give in. Vince did, but only for one night. Warrior went out at SummerSlam, teamed with Hogan, and performed as if nothing had happened. After the match, Vince paid him exactly what he demanded. And then, the moment Warrior walked back through the curtain, Vince confronted him directly. He handed Warrior a letter, informing him that he was suspended, effective immediately. Warrior was stunned. The fans were stunned. And the WWF moved on without him. Hogan took back the spotlight, business slowly stabilized, and Warrior's dream of being the next wrestling icon collapsed overnight. The suspension destroyed his momentum. Fans moved on. Merchandising shifted away from his image, and the company's creative team stopped planning long-term stories involving him. When Warrior eventually returned in 1992, the aura was gone. He was smaller, leading to steroid rumors, slower, and less intense. The magic wasn't there. Even children, once his biggest supporters, felt the shift. Warrior's mystique depended on his intensity. And without it, he looked like a fading star trying to relive past glory. Backstage, things were no better. Wrestlers whispered that Warrior had become unreliable. Some believed he only returned for the money. Others said he no longer had the passion. And Vince McMahon, dealing with illegal storms and massive company problems, didn't trust Warrior at all. The bond that once connected them had been shattered permanently. Then came the final blow. The 1992 steroid scandal. The government cracked down on the WWF. Warrior's sudden physical changes raised eyebrows. Vince didn't want controversy. Warrior was quietly released. No farewell, no final match, no closure. The Ultimate Warrior, once seen as the future. The next Hulk Hogan, the unstoppable force of the 1990s, was gone, and the company barely acknowledged it. His title reign, intended to spark a new era, became a cautionary tale. Fans remembered the energy, the face paint, the rope shaking, but they also remembered the chaos, the ego, the instability. Warrior's downfall wasn't caused by a single moment. It was a chain reaction, a rushed push, a mismatch with the fan base, backstage conflicts, poor business numbers, and the emotional breakdown between him and Vince McMahon. As the 1990s continued, wrestling evolved without him. Stars like Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, and The Undertaker carried the era forward. Warrior remained a ghost, a reminder of a gamble that didn't pay off. But in the next chapter, something unexpected happened. Years after leaving, Warrior returned to the WWF in one of the most shocking comebacks in wrestling history. A comeback loaded with drama, controversy, and one final clash that showed how deeply his legacy was intertwined with Vince McMahon. No one expected him to ever return. For years, Vince McMahon and the Ultimate Warrior were locked in silence. A silence filled with anger, betrayal, missed opportunities, and unfinished business. Warrior had walked away from WWE twice. Each time, the door seemed sealed forever. Fans believed that the myth of the Warrior would remain trapped in the past, remembered only through old VHS tapes and fading memories of neon face paint and frantic energy. But in the early 2000s, something strange began happening behind the scenes. Vince McMahon started reaching out. Privately. Slowly, quietly, WWE executives initiated conversations with Warrior about making peace. For years, Warrior had been publicly critical of WWE. He accused Vince of manipulating him, exploiting him, and rewriting history to portray him as unstable. But behind Warrior's anger was a man aging, softening, and realizing that he couldn't outrun his own legacy forever. His daughters were growing up. Fans still loved him. And despite everything, the character of the Ultimate Warrior remained one of the most iconic images in wrestling history. Vince knew this, Warrior knew this, and the world was about to witness a reunion no one believed was possible. The first sign of reconciliation came when Warrior appeared in a WWE video game. Fans exploded with excitement. After nearly 2 decades of silence, the Neon Wildman was back in the spotlight. His entrance, his screams, his energy, it all felt alive again. But what people didn't know was that this was just the beginning. WWE wasn't building toward a small cameo. Vince McMahon was preparing something much bigger. Warrior's return to the Hall of Fame. Warrior agreed, but not without conditions. He wanted respect. He wanted recognition. And most importantly, he wanted to reclaim his story, not as the unreliable star who failed, but as a man who inspired millions of children, who carried the company during a tough era, who gave everything he had until his body and mind broke. Vince promised him all of it. Whether out of guilt, business, or genuine sentiment, no one can say. But the truce was real. The bridge that burned in 1991 was being rebuilt plank by plank. Then came WrestleMania weekend 2014, the moment wrestling fans still struggle to talk about without feeling a chill. When Warrior walked onto the Hall of Fame stage, he wasn't the massive, muscle-packed superhero people remembered. He was older, slower, and clearly exhausted. But when he spoke, the arena fell silent. His voice trembled at first, but soon it rose with the intensity of the character he once embodied. He thanked his wife. He thanked his daughters. He even thanked WWE. For the first time in decades, Warrior felt loved, truly loved, by the fans who grew up watching him sprint to the ring and shake the ropes like he possessed the energy of 100 men. The next night, on Monday Night Raw, something incredible happened. Warrior walked into the WWE ring wearing a mask that resembled his iconic face paint. The entire crowd stood up. Children who had never seen him wrestle cheered with the same passion their parents once had. Warrior held the microphone, breathing heavily, overwhelmed by emotion. And then he delivered one of the most haunting promos in wrestling history. A speech about legacy, memory, and the heartbeat of every warrior who ever inspired the world. Inside that ring, Warrior said something that would echo forever. Every man's heart one day beats its final beat. Every man's lungs one day breathe their final breath. And if what that man did in his life makes the blood pulse through the bodies of others, then his spirit will run forever. Fans cheered. Wrestlers backstage cried. The world watched a man reclaim his legacy and stand tall one last time. No one knew it, but Warrior was saying goodbye. His words were not a promo. They were a farewell letter delivered in front of millions. The next day, Warrior traveled with his wife and daughters. He seemed tired but happy. He signed autographs. He smiled in photos. He spoke with fans who told him how much his character meant to them. But witnesses said something else too. He was sweating heavily. breathing harder than usual and clutching his chest from time to time. The years of stress, steroids, constant adrenaline spikes, and emotional turmoil had taken their toll. On April 8th, 2014, the world received news that felt impossible. Warrior collapsed outside his hotel. His wife screamed for help. Staff rushed to him. Paramedics arrived quickly, but nothing worked. The man who once sprinted to the ring with unstoppable force was gone. His heart had given out, just one day after delivering a speech about every man's heart beating one final beat. Fans around the world were in shock. Social media flooded with tributes. Wrestlers who once clashed with him posted emotional messages. Even those who disliked him respected the magnitude of his legacy. Vince McMahon released a public statement that many believed came straight from the heart. The Ultimate Warrior had become eternal in a way no storyline, no championship, no controversy ever could. But with his death came questions. Questions that fans still debate today. Was his return too stressful? Did years of physical strain finally catch up? Or was it simply fate that he said goodbye only hours before his body failed? Some call it destiny. Some call it coincidence. Others believe Warrior somehow knew his time had come, and he wanted his children to see him celebrated by millions before he left this world. In the months that followed, WWE honored Warrior with tributes, documentaries, and the creation of the Warrior Award, dedicated to people who show incredible strength and courage. The award ensured that Warrior's name would be associated not with controversy, but with resilience and inspiration, the values his character stood for, even when the man behind the paint struggled to live up to them. Warrior's story is not simple. It is a saga of triumph and failure, loyalty and betrayal, ego and vulnerability. He rose to the top faster than almost anyone in wrestling history. He fell just as quickly. He clashed with Vince McMahon, fought his own battles, disappeared, and then returned for the most emotional farewell wrestling has ever seen. His life is a reminder that legends are not perfect. They are human. And sometimes, their greatest impact comes long after the cheers fade. And yet, one question remains. A question only fans can answer. Did the Ultimate Warrior find redemption in the end? Or did wrestling simply rewrite his legacy to give him the goodbye he never got? What do you think?